All right. So we have been looking ahead to 2021 to figure out what marketers should be thinking about as we, come up on the new year. And we've talked about AI and voice search, and we've talked about interactive content, but here's something that's really big. It's funny because I feel funny saying that it's big because I used to think it was so old, but podcasts are really where it's at lately. As of October, it was reported that there were over 1.5 million active podcast shows out there. That's over 34 million episodes. I mean,
Pretty
that's
crazy.
a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So, I mean, there are a lot of things I want to talk about here because I think one of it's definitely a trend, but is it a fad? Is really what I want to know. Also, I used to think. I remember we were talking about podcasts a few years ago, and we were like, "No, I don't think we want to do a podcast." And then, and it was for something else, but we kind of stayed away from that. And now here we are, and we have a podcast. We're starting another podcast for another another media property, and everybody and their mom has podcasts.
Yep.
So what's up with that?
Well, I mean, it's interesting too, because it did explode, right? And I agree. I think a lot of people sort of wish, they started them years ago. But, one of the things that's interesting, I think, is, well, there's two things, right? You're talking about there's 1.5 million active podcasts, and we know a lot of the big podcasts out there have hundreds, if not thousands, some of them episodes. So I wonder how many of those podcasts actually have one or two episodes and just sort of fail, because I think they don't get instant gratification on creating their podcast. Like, I created a podcast and I didn't get 4 million, listeners, right. Number one, and they, sort of quit. But I mean, what's really what's really interesting to me is, are we going to see, brands having podcasts, companies actually doing their podcasts? And I think that's going to be the big thing for 2021, where you're going to see these very branded podcasts that people are really into. Look, you really love Campbell's Soup. Maybe Campbell's Soup is going to have a podcast, and they're going to talk about, chicken stars and chicken noodle soup and tomato soup. And you get my point. I mean, it would probably be other stuff than that, but you get my point. If you're really into something, you would pretty much listen to a podcast on it, or watch it, depending on the aspect of what that podcast is.
Right. And it's a great, I think in addition to companies, I think entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, or whatever you want to call them, startups. I mean, anybody who wants to be seen as some sort of an expert in their industry is jumping on the podcast wagon, because if you have a podcast, then you might come off like you are an expert at something. And right. It does attract a new audience, a different audience. It allows you to kind of create some brand awareness, especially if you're in startup mode or you're, a solopreneur. So it is a really cool thing to do. Now, I definitely think the brands are going to jump on that. And you were talking about Campbell's. I think that you'll see, like, chicken soup for the soul. Like, you'll have like these feel good home stories, right?
Right, exactly.
Campbell should really get on that.
Right. And you could definitely, I mean, and even, and you need to make it, I know we're talking about soup, but you need to make it the flavor you like, right? If you like chicken stars, make your
potato.
podcast.
I'm big on potato soup.
Right. But here's my point. Like, as a solopreneur, right, you could have other people, your company makes X, you have other experts, come on. It doesn't just need to be you and, the same, two people talking all the time. Most of the most interesting podcasts out there they have guests. Right. They come on, they have experts, they talk about different things in their industry. Some are more, more general podcasts, but most people are talking about things in their industry, with experts in their industry. And that's where I think, like, a lot of solopreneurs and companies actually have a big advantage, because a lot of times they have those experts already. So it's a great way to highlight some of the stuff that's going on at those companies, as well as the experts at those companies.
Yeah. And I really think, for example, I think a lot of our clients should do this. I really think that now is the time. Now is the time to start your podcast, get your CEOs, get your rank and file folks and get everybody, kind of contributing to that podcast every week, someone different or some different topic where you bring in different employees to kind of talk about the thing, or, it's really a new way to market your brand. It's not new, but it's new.
Not, I mean, we talk about this all the time. Isn't it just like a radio show?
It's a radio show. Yes.
Yeah, it's a radio show, and what's interesting too. But they're radio shows that people are recording because they're producing it in multiple channels. So and that's this. Look, if you're going to do it, record it too. Make videos of it. Don't just have the audio version of your podcast or the video version of your podcast. Do both.
Yeah, because now you can shave off clips, and you've got videos for social, and you've got a blog, and you've got all kinds of content recording.